All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to uncover a massive, completely hidden reality in the tech world today. It's a story buried deep in pricing spreadsheets, not flashy press releases. We are talking about the most downloaded AI models on the planet. And guess what? They are not coming from Silicon Valley. We are witnessing a quiet, sweeping migration. And listen, this isn't about geopolitics. It's not about the US-China rivalry at all. Fundamentally, it's about return on investment. The engineers, the investors, the folks running real profitable companies, they've already made the switch, quietly, without making a fuss. So today, we're going to look exactly at why this is happening and dig into the raw economics driving the whole thing.
The sheer scale of this shift is honestly staggering. Check this out. According to data from Andreessen Horowitz, one of the most powerful venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, 80% of American startups building on open source AI are quietly doing it on Chinese models right now. 80%. Just think about that for a second. The US has literally poured hundreds of billions of dollars into staying ahead in the AI race, right? Yet its own startups are building their foundation on models like Qwen from Alibaba or DeepSeek. You don't see this switch making the front page headlines because, well, it's happening deep down in the infrastructure decisions of these companies.
And the major players, they are migrating incredibly fast. Like when Airbnb moved its customer service AI to Alibaba's Qwen, there was no massive press release. The CEO just casually explained it in a Bloomberg interview using 3 very powerful words: good, fast, cheap. That's it. Pinterest actually did something really similar. They completely rebuilt their recommendation engine on Chinese open source tech. Why would they do that? Well, as their CTO pointed out, these models were 30% more accurate and a staggering 90% cheaper than the American alternatives. I mean, you really can't argue with those numbers.
So the crucial takeaway here is that even the highly visible US tools are secretly relying heavily on this architecture from the East. Take Cursor, for example. It's basically the most popular AI coding tool in America. Well, when users recently dug into the code of their latest version, they found the underlying engine wasn't American at all. It was actually Kimi 2.5, which is made by a Beijing startup called Moonshot AI. The co-founder actually had to come out and publicly admit it. Or look at Mira Murati, OpenAI's former CTO who helped make ChatGPT a household name. She just raised a historic $2 billion for her new lab. And the very first thing she shipped? A tool that helps developers fine-tune Alibaba's Qwen.
Now, you might be sitting there wondering, okay, but what about performance? Well, Stanford researchers recently revealed that the performance gap between the absolute best US model and the absolute best Chinese model has shrunk to a tiny, almost invisible 2.7%. They have nearly erased America's lead entirely. But here's the really important catch. Stanford was only measuring performance. They didn't measure value. When two models are essentially equal in capability, but one has a radically, and I mean radically different price tag, that 2.7% gap, it basically means nothing in the business world.
And this perfectly illustrates that massive economic chasm we're talking about. Look at these numbers. If your company processes 100 million tokens a month, and you can just think of tokens as the basic pieces of words that AI reads, a top-tier Western model like Claude Opus is going to run you about $1,500, okay? Now, Alibaba's Qwen 3.5 Plus comes in at just $120. And DeepSeek is delivering nearly identical benchmark performance for just $35. $35. That's not just a nice discount, folks. That is an entirely different economic reality for any business trying to scale their AI.
Moving into the next part of our explainer, we run into what's basically an engineering paradox: how hardware bans actually forced software brilliance. You've got to be asking yourself, how on earth are they getting these comparable results for so much less money? Well, the assumption in Washington was that by banning China from buying NVIDIA's absolute best chips, Chinese AI labs would inevitably fall behind. But the exact opposite happened. Unable to buy the best hardware, Chinese engineers had to completely rewrite the software playbook just to survive. So instead of relying on brute force compute power and massive farms of the latest chips, they got brilliantly creative with efficiency. They leaned heavily into an architecture known as mixture of experts. Basically, this means they sliced their models into 256 ultra-specialized expert clusters to drastically reduce chip consumption.
Let me break down how that actually works. When you ask a coding question, only 8 of those 256 clusters wake up. The rest of the network, it stays completely asleep. By doing this, they managed to compress the model's working memory by over 90%. It's this incredibly low chip consumption that allowed DeepSeek to build a world-class model for reportedly just $6 million, which is pocket change in the AI world. And reports indicate they're eventually going to be training entirely on domestic Huawei chips. They essentially substituted scarce hardware with absolute software brilliance.
And that brings us to the money. Let's follow the capital and look at the absolute boom happening with Hong Kong IPOs right now. This hyper-efficiency we just talked about, it has ignited an absolute frenzy on the capital side of things. Right now, the energy around these AI companies makes the Hong Kong Stock Exchange the hottest AI market on Earth. Literally. Take Zipu AI, for example. They're a Beijing company building open-source models, known locally as one of the AI tigers. So on January 8th, they listed on the Hong Kong Exchange. Retail investors fought so hard for shares that the public offering was oversubscribed 1,160 times. Just let that sink in. For every single share available, over 1,000 investors wanted in. By day 43, the stock had skyrocketed over 500%. And honestly, they are just the tip of the iceberg here. They are part of a massive pipeline of over 400 companies just waiting to list. The very next day after Zipu, a rather shy startup called Minimax listed. Investors borrowed an unbelievable 148 billion Hong Kong dollars in margin financing just to get access. The stock doubled on day one. At one point, this relatively unknown startup temporarily overtook Baidu's entire market cap. And right behind them, you have Moonshot AI propping for an $18 billion IPO and Unitree Robotics filing for a $610 million IPO. Oh, and by the way, Unitree actually turned an $87 million profit last year, which is practically unheard of for early AI hardware startups. Driven almost entirely by this exploding AI ecosystem, Hong Kong raised a staggering $14 billion in equity sales in just the first quarter of 2026. That is their best Q1 in 5 years. They blew past the Nasdaq and every other exchange globally. People used to look at Hong Kong mostly for tax efficiency, right? Well, now they are looking at it because it's beating as the financial heart of this incredibly efficient AI ecosystem. Now, let's step away from the stock market for a minute and look at the new business frontier. Specifically, how this is industrializing AI adoption. Back down on the ground, this cheap infrastructure is fundamentally altering how everyday businesses are built. In cities all across China, local governments are actually handing out cash incentives and subsidies to what they call one-person companies. They are actively pushing individuals to build AI-powered businesses on their own, utilizing these open-source models that cost practically nothing to run. And you can see the startling results of this in the short drama industry. Thanks to these nearly free tools, the production cost of a short drama has been slashed from around $150,000 to just $15,000. That's a 90% reduction. And the production timeline cut from a whole month down to under 5 days. Because of this insane efficiency, the industry is now churning out roughly 470 new shows every single day. So what about the rest of the world? Well, while the US and China sprint ahead, the US with its massive capital and frontier labs, and China with its extreme efficiency and open source ecosystem, Europe is unfortunately being sidelined. Europe actually trains more AI researchers per capita than the US or China, but then they just watch them leave. The EU's strict AI Act has created a highly fragmented legal environment that's raised costs and really slowed down deployment. As the CEO of Mistral noted recently, despite having these brilliant researchers, the continent currently produces near zero global AI products. When we analyze this massive shift objectively, it's clear that smart companies aren't just blindly jumping in. They are carefully weighing the real pros and cons. On the massive advantage side, these models are 90% cheaper. You can self-host them completely on your own infrastructure, and your data never leaves your servers, which, let's be real, is absolutely huge for privacy. But there are friction points. Chinese models do carry potential political censorship on certain topics. Plus, there's US-China regulatory uncertainty and some very real data handling questions to consider. So what we're seeing is smart companies edging toward running Chinese models for their cost-sensitive workloads while keeping Western models for tasks that require maximum control or compliance. The reality is, just a year ago, there was basically one playbook. You pay to rent a brain from OpenAI or Google through an API, and they can change the price on you whenever they want. Well, that consensus is completely dead. The playing field has been flattened in a way we really haven't seen since the very early days of the internet. Fortune 500 companies are right now running real, heavy workloads on open-source models they can download and own outright. So the ultimate question for any developer, entrepreneur, or business leader tuning in is this. Now that these incredibly powerful tools are essentially free and open, what will you build in the gap?